How to homebrew the extract version, making wort to the start of fermentation. I'm going to go through here the basic steps to make your first batch of extract beer from a kit. First thing you want to do is fill a stock pot with water, roughly 5 to 6 gallons, 6 because you're going to boil some off. You're going to use a turkey burner, so you're going to want to light that turkey burner, get your water heated to about 155 degrees Fahrenheit. You're going to need a thermometer, a way to measure that accurately. Now, I strongly recommend brewing 5-gallon batches. Some people stick to the smaller, the kind of the partial boils, and then they'll add up to volume at the end. I think you get much better quality boiling 5 from the start. You're going to get better hop utilization, no caramelization of your malts. It's really the way to do it. Now the next step is to add your specialty grains to your muslin bag. The specialty grains are really what define the beer, and you'll need those grains and the flavors from that. Now the muslin bag, the point of that is to contain those grains and make it so they're easy to remove before you start the boil. These are going to be added once your water temperature hits at about 155 degrees Fahrenheit. So use your thermometer at this point, verify you're at 155. Once you're there, add in that muslin bag. Now at this point, I'll typically stir it just a little bit to kind of get the water into the bag, get a little bit of moving in there, and even heat it just maybe a hair over 155 because it's going to cool once you shut it down. At that point, you're going to let it sit for 30 minutes. Ideally, it would stay at 155 if you can keep your burner on low enough just to keep it at 155. Typically, it'll keep heating up, so I always shut mine down. After a half an hour, you're going to want to light that propane burner back up, get it going if you shut it off. And the turkey burner really comes in handy at this point. You can get your 5 gallons of wort boiling in roughly 20 minutes. And you can get it to a vigorous boil. Alright, at this point, your wort's just getting heated, but your specialty grains in your muslin bag is still in the wort. So you're going to want to identify that bag, grab a hold of it, and pull it out. You don't want those grains to exceed 170 degrees Fahrenheit. Otherwise, they're going to leach flavors from the husks, and that's going to result in flavors you're not going to want in your beer. So be sure to pull that out and set that aside. Now, after roughly 20 minutes, your wort should be pretty close to boiling, if not already. You can see in this video here that the wort's just starting to get rolling. It's not quite to a vigorous boil yet, but it's getting there. So once this starts, you want to be sure to add in your bittering hops. These are going to kind of give your beer that bitter flavor. Once you add, watch out for boilovers. Typically, you'll get them right away. So if you can keep it down, you might have to turn it down at that point. Just watch out for that. Usually, if you can get through that first phase, that's when the boilover will happen. So if you can make it through there, you'll usually be pretty stable. You also want to add in your malt extract. Typically, I'll actually add that in before the hops. For whatever reason, in this case, I kind of swapped them. Not a big deal, though. So at this point, you're going to want to let your wort boil for 45 minutes. As you can see in the video, I've got a pretty vigorous boil going here, almost to the point where it's splashing over the sides, and that's really key. And you can see all the volatile components coming off the top, the steam. That's pretty crucial for making good beer. This is kind of the separation point. Alright, now you're going to have a lot of free time, so you're going to want to give your vicious Doberman a dog treat. Or a small child, that'll work too. I mean, the last thing you want is your Doberman attacking you while brewing some beer. I mean, that's the #1 factor for making bad beer, is being attacked by your Doberman, so be sure to get him a treat. Alright, you're going to want to keep checking back that your boiling's under control. Your Doberman hasn't escaped the yard. Things are going well. With about 10 to 15 minutes left in your boil, this is where I'll add in yeast nutrient. And this is more critical for the fermentation part. This is what will really make the yeast happy at that point. It gives them the nutrients they need to reproduce, to grow, and just make the beer they're capable of. And without this, you run the risk of getting stuck fermentations, other issues. So Be sure to add that in. It's just another precaution you can take. You're also going to want to add in your Irish moss, more for clarifying the beer in that later part of fermentation. Alright, so now if you have a wort chiller, this is the step where you're going to want to add that into your boiling wort. The boiling wort will sterilize your chiller. It'll heat it up, so any bacteria, anything unusual that could potentially contaminate your fermentation, that'll be killed at this step. So you just want to let that sit in there for a few minutes. Now if you have any aroma hops or late addition hops, this is the point you're going to want to add those in. And these will just be boiled for roughly a couple minutes right before we shut the flame off and start cooling. Alright, now if you have an oxygen aerator, this is the point you're going to want to add in that hose and stone to your boiling wort. And that will sanitize all bugs or organisms that might still be on that hose. Now if you're a beginner, I don't really recommend using the aerator. You can actually manually stir your carboy by hand, as long as you're not going to really extreme high gravity beers. At this point, you're going to want to turn on your wort chiller garden hose. And what that'll do is purge cold water then through your copper coil, and then it will purge out hot water from the other side. Basically a chilling unit there. So at this point, you're going to want to take your temperature probe, put that in, make sure it's sanitized too. And then you're going to stir this for 15 to 20 minutes is kind of average time it'll take to go from boiling temperature down to roughly 65 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's the temperature you're going to want to pitch your yeast at. If you pitch too hot, oftentimes you can do damage to your yeast, where then you'll get stuck fermentation. You'll have issues there. So you always want to make sure your temperature that you pitch at is definitely on the colder side of what your set point would be, and then you can easily heat it back up to that point. So as you're chilling your wort, at this point you can cleanse and sanitize your carboy, bring that out and get that staged up ready to go. Once you hit 65 and you're cool, you've kind of maximized then the solubility of your oxygen. So at that point you'll aerate your wort if you have an oxygen tank. If not, you'll skip this step, you'll add it to your carboy, and then at that point you'll stir the carboy, tip it on its side, cap it, roll it around for a good 10 to 15 minutes, and that'll be sufficient, unless you are doing the higher gravity beers, because those are the ones that are critical for the oxygen. So you might need some assistance on the second part, but transfer your wort into your carboy, making sure you don't tip the funnel over and pour it all onto the ground. Once you get it in there, you're pretty well set to go. Make sure your airlocks are nearby, cleansed and sanitized. So go ahead and add at this point your yeast. I have a yeast starter that I already prepped ahead of time. Some people might add their vial from White Labs Y yeast, or even the dry packets of yeast directly to the fermenter. I always recommend a starter for vitality. So then at that point your carboy's done, put your airlock on, transfer him into a location you're going to ferment at. Here I have basically a tank where I set the carboy with an aquarium pump that'll circulate water, an aquarium heater, which will be my heater. The whole area is kind of a heat sink, as the temperature within the room is roughly 62. Then I have a thermistor that actually feeds back to a control device, which I can change the set point, get it to where I need it. It'll enable the heater and the water circulation to run through and over the surface of the carboy, which gives me very good temperature control. I can hold within 1 degree Fahrenheit. And at that point, I'll just let the yeast make beer. They run with it. At the end of that, I'll transfer bottle. It's all done. Cheers.